Well, good evening, everyone. I just got out of work and I figured let's get some episodes transferred. Actually, I'll probably only be wide awake enough to do one tonight. I might not get to more until like Sunday evening. So, what's today's topic going to be? Well, step three from the title, obviously. But what is step three? It is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And I'm sure you're all getting tired of listening to me talk. So today I snagged something from a lady named Mary Pearl T. And she's a big speaker in Al Anon. So let me bring this up and I'll turn it over to her. There we are. Okay, and let's go back to the beginning.
Security? And you were like, absolutely not.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay. Play my podcast, not maintenance. Okay. All right. I'm going to now.
Hi there, and welcome to I'm Only Human, a podcast that attempts to explain how to coexist with other humans. This podcast is going to dive into topics like: is it possible to overcome human nature? Are rules and laws necessary for taming bad behaviors, or are they simply a control mechanism crafted by other disturbed minds? Why do we fight with each other? How does traditional religion impact us? Can social disease be healed through individual recovery? My name is Jen, and I'm an average human. Before I begin, I would like to state that I will be talking about controversial things such as, but not limited to, religion, God, the Bible, 12-step programs, and politics. I am not an expert, and I don't claim to be one. I will, however, be referencing Alcoholics Anonymous because it is the granddaddy of all other 12-step programs. I will also be quoting things from the Bible and mentioning God along with different religions. I'm not trying to promote a particular program, nor am I trying to convert anyone. I believe religion gives us a foundation, and 12-step recovery guides people down a path to self-actualization. Through recovery, healing is possible. I believe that changed minds and attitudes can change our world. Welcome to the show, listeners. I wanted to have another voice today, and I didn't know exactly what to say on step three. So I snagged a speaker. Her name is Mary Pearl T, and she is funny. I think she's funny. I actually grabbed this courtesy of the Recovery Show, so I need to give them a little bit of credit. I left Spencer's show exit on my episode, so you can hear how he closes out his podcast, and I will put the link to their show in my show notes. Spencer also covers different types of recovery, so if you're looking for other recovery stories and whatnot, it's a good place to go check out, at least until I build up my library a little bit. Then come back. Please come back.
Step three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That's the God that you understand, not a God of somebody else's understanding. It doesn't, if you were in a formal religion, it doesn't have to be that. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It's the God that you can understand. And I remember the first speaker that I ever heard at a conference. Her name was Ramona Belford, and she was an Indian girl from Oklahoma. And her spirit, her higher power was the Great Spirit. And she said, I would give you my higher power. But if I did, I would take away the joy of you developing that for yourself. And I thought, that's okay. I'll take yours. I don't need joy. But that's the truth, and the thing about it is, remember at this step, you're only being asked to make a decision. It doesn't say you turn your will and your life over, because how do you do that? I don't know. How do you do that? I don't know. How do you find out? By working the rest of the steps. All you have to decide here is, are you going to do it on your own from now on like you've been doing? Or are you going to ask a power greater than you to give you guidance and direction? Are you going to do it different here? That's all it's about. It's just making a decision to do it another way. Do it another way. And I found that it's amazing when I decided I would take the third step prayer, and I took it, and I was like maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. JD was working; he would get home around 4, and I was sitting there, and I thought, okay, God, I'm ready. I am ready to turn my will in my life. That's my thoughts and my actions. I'm going to run stuff past you instead of just going off on automatic. I'm going to really try. I can see you've been working in my life, but now I want to make a conscious decision to turn my will and my life over to you. And are you ready to get it? I need a sign. I need something to know that it's okay. And so I sat there and I got on my knees and I did the third step prayer, and nothing happened. I knew it. God don't want my will in my life. I figured it would come down to this. Maybe you're not looking in the right place. So I go rummaging over in a closet, and I go down in the bottom, and I pick up that Bible that I'd had when I was a little kid. And I brought it back, and I said, I'm going to open it up, and God's going to say, okay. I opened it up. Don't mean a thing. Best 2 out of 3. Open it up. Nothing's happening. And so I just set it over there on top of the end table. And I'm so discouraged. And JD comes in. I said, well, I tried to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, but he doesn't want it. JD said, really? I said, yeah. And he said, honey, I don't. And I said, don't argue with me. This is my will, my God. He said, okay. So the next morning I get up. Now, what do you do? What do you do? Well, my sponsor had told me in the mornings all I need to do is say, please. And that could be my prayer for the start of my day, and end it with thank you. That's simple enough. Well, all I know to do is what I've been doing. So I say please, and I reach over for my ODAT book. And my ODAT book is underneath the Bible, where I had laid it on top of the end table. And I snatched my ODAT out from under that Bible, lest it be contaminated. And I did my reading for the day. And then I thought, okay, and the Bible fell on the floor. And so I thought, okay, I'll go and I'll put that back in the bottom of the box over there where it was. And I don't know why, but I just happened to glance down because it had fell open. And it said, be still and know that I am God. So God did answer. God answers in his time and in his way, not necessarily on demand. And I knew, as one of the girls our sponsor says, down deep in your knower, you know, deep down inside where you know all things. And so I found that, it says, turn your will and your life over the care of God, a loving God, not a punishing God, not a fearsome God, a loving God, because God loves you and cares. God cannot hate that he creates. And God knows you better than anybody else. And the funny thing is, the closer you spend time with God, the more you know about you. Because if you want to know how something ticks, get with the person who made it. Because God knows you and understands you. Now, I had lots of religious training as a child, but like I said, I didn't develop a relationship. And I found out that God doesn't hold grudges. And he's not into a lot of stuff that everybody gives him credit for. God has a sense of humor. And I was talking to my sponsor, and I said, if I could make God, this is how I'd make God. And I told her he would have a sense of humor. He would be very forgiving. He would always be loving. He would always be there. Always be there. No matter what I did, no matter if I screwed up or not, God would still love me. He wouldn't quit loving me. And she said, that's the way your higher power can be. She said, your God can be any way that you need your God to be. And if anything touches me in any area of my life, God cares. God cares about those things. And God told us, she says, God can be all those things. And she says, God brings good, orderly directions, the G-O-D, good, orderly directions into your life each day. And if you follow those, it's okay. And I said, well, how do you know if you're doing God's will? She says, well, you know when you're not doing God's will. So you're halfway there. She says, if you don't do the things you know you're not supposed to do, chances are you might be doing something you should be doing. And so that was how we started that journey. And she says, did you know whatever you think about the most becomes your higher power for that moment in time? If you're focusing on another person, they become your higher power because what they're doing and not doing is affecting how you're doing and not doing, feeling, whatever. So she says, just be sure and let God be God. And don't put God in a box. Don't limit God on how he can do things. Just like they're putting the money in the pants pocket. When my sister was in the hospital, she had to have heart surgery in 95. I'd been spending a lot of money and a lot of time staying over at the hospital with her because she also had blood clots in her lungs after the surgery. So she didn't get to come home for a month. And that was a lot of extra expense from where I live back and forth every day. And I thought, oh, it's time for our annual yard party. And oh gosh, I'm running a little short. I don't know if I'm going to have the money to be able to do that or not. And then I went to the post office. It was raining. I got out of the car and I saw this dollar bill laying down there in the water, and it was folded, and I picked it up and threw it in the car and went on in the post office and mail the stuff. Got back later in the day. I thought, oh, I need to unwrap that, unwind it so it'll dry. And it was $100 bill. See, I would never tell God to put it in a puddle in front of the post office. So don't limit God on how he brings things to you. And another thing, I had to trust God. Now, trusting God was a whole different thing. You can believe in God, but do you trust God? You see, a lot of times I had given God credit for doing bad things to me. I'd say God was the giant zapper. You'll be going along and all of a sudden you get zapped, because what happened is I would have to accept the consequences of my actions. I call that zapping. And that was just the natural consequence to have to take for the actions I had been taking. And so I had to learn to give God another chance. And so I had to forgive God for all those things I had blamed him for and ask him to forgive me for judging. And that cleared up that relationship for me. And following God's will doesn't just mean drifting along with the tide. You got to have a conscious, wholehearted bending of your will to merge with God's will. And the acid test is it working? If it's not working, then you're not doing your part, because God always does his. And if your God, is not big enough, then get you a bigger God. For a lot of times people would say to me, well, when do you run? What if God has a quota on things he'll do for you? I said, well, I think that's limiting God. I don't think God has a quota. I haven't got a quota on how many times I can screw up. It just happens. You wake up and there it is. And in order to have a God, you got to quit being God, And they had a big sign in the Serenity House that says, today there's only one God, and you're not him. And, that's the truth, because those are the kind of things that I would get into doing, playing God or making decisions based on my will. And I was told to practice the presence of God in my life on a daily basis. And that is when you wake up in the morning, it's like, God, here we go. Go with me this day. And my sponsor for a long time had me do mirror talk. And that's where I'd get up and I'd look in the mirror and I'd say, good morning, God. Nothing's going to happen to me today that we can't get through together. Love, God. I'd do that and I'd say, but that's me looking. She said, it says that God is made, you're made in God's image. So if you're looking at you, you're looking at God. Because God is inside of each and every one. We search for God everywhere. God's not lost. He's right inside. What a sneaky place to hide. We have a tendency to look out there. But the problem with me is I have a spiritual hole. And that spiritual hole cannot be filled by things outside. I tried that for years. Haven't you ever said, whenever I get this, whenever I do that, whenever this happens, everything will be okay? And then you get that, do that, or get that, and guess what? It's still not okay, because it hasn't filled that spiritual hole. And all that stuff out there is not really important. Once the spiritual hole is filled, you're okay. Whether all that stuff is okay or not, you're okay. So it's better to be okay than to worry about the other. And then, there's two prayers too that is like, God, help me to let you work in my life today. Help me stay out of your way and don't let me push you aside. Because so many times we push God aside. I think I got a better plan. Or it doesn't look like God's working on it. See, that's the thing. When you're not getting the results you think there ought to be happening, it's like God's not working on it. Well, God is working on it, whether it looks like it or not. Because there's no spot where God is not. And so I've learned in the blessed block it. I'll say, God, here's what I think I need to do. Either bless it or block it. I'm okay either way. I want to do what you want me to do. If it's supposed to be, then bless it and let it go. And God, when you're blocking it, when you shut the door, help me to recognize a closed door before I beat my head flat. You'd be surprised how many times you'll run your head into the door thinking, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Because, we've got problems. We have problems with selfishness. How's it going to affect me? And then self-seeking. What's in it for me? And then the worst one, self-centeredness. It's all about me. Those are the things that block us, And you got to use God for the little things. I always feel like the big things in life, we can do those pretty good. Bad or good, we can get through those. But it's those everyday little fleas and ticks that drive you nuts. It's those little annoying things, It's like my husband, he's a pack rat, and he doesn't have a place for anything. So whenever he's through with it, there is his place. And whereas I'm organized and I have a place and I want things to be in their place. And so I live with a man who's just the opposite. Why do we do that? Why do we pick idiots that are so different from us? Because they're exciting and because we love them. And so I have to accept less than perfection. If I don't, it'll drive me crazy. So when I see stuff laying out, I say to myself, how important is it? Is it worth bad feelings to him? Is it worth making him feel less than to point out his defect today? Is it worth that today? Some days when I'm in a pissy mood, yeah, it's worth it. That's what we have an amends step about. But you just got to trust. You got to trust God to bring those things. We have had lots of instances of things when you just have to turn it over and then accept what happens. What happens is God's will, or it wouldn't be happening. It has to be. And sometimes it's like in situation with my sister and her health situation, I had to keep saying, I trust you, God. 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 I have to just make that a mantra and keep saying it all the time. And then I'd say, I don't really trust you, but I'm going to say this until I can. Thank you. I trust you, God. I trust you, God. Because it's like I didn't like what was happening. I didn't like the way it was. And I'm always telling my husband about stuff. I'll say, just get a grip here, boy. And you know what? I found out you get the best grip when you learn to let go. That's when you really get the grip, when God comes in.
Thank you for listening, and please keep coming back. Whatever your problems, there are those among us who have had them too. May understanding, love, and peace grow in you one day at a time.
In closing, I would like to say that the opinions expressed here were strictly of my own making, or by my guests. Take what you like and leave the rest. You may come to realize that you may not like me or what I want to share. Let's talk to each other, reason things out, but let there be no gossip or criticism of one another. Instead, let the fellowship of ethical human behavior and the serenity from positive human interaction help you grow and chill out, one experience at a time. I would like to thank my higher power for guiding me through this podcast. I hope to spread the message of love, hope, and understanding by touching one life at a time. If you like this podcast, please like and share it. Comments also help other struggling people find it. I am now listener supported, and if you would like to contribute, please feel free. There is no obligation. If you would like to share feedback, you can email me at averagehumanbeing1875@gmail.com. There is also a link you can click if you'd like to send a voice message and add to the content of the show.
Okay, and there you have it. And then you also got to hear the closing from Spencer's show, The Recovery Show. I haven't listened to The Recovery Show in quite a long time. It was nice hearing Spencer's voice because he was the first podcast that I started really listening to. Okay, well, that's it for today. Join me again next time for whatever the topic is. I forgot to remember to write it down before I clicked on this one. All right, have a good evening. Bye-bye.